Hey everyone, welcome to Motivation Monday. We have myself, Jason, and Hope with us, and we're about to dive into week 2 of our series, What's the Point? But before we do that, we have some fun summer updates about what we got going on this week.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this Wednesday night, we have our summer kickoff event. So be sure to go online and register for that. And then Thursday afternoon, we have our summer hangouts that are going to be every Thursday afternoon. And then also we have small groups starting up next week, which is super exciting. So be sure to hop online and register for all of those activities.
Awesome. We're really excited. This Wednesday in particular is going to be our summer kickoff. So we're going to be, I keep saying kickoff, because I'm thinking about food, guys. So we'll be serving, some individual served hot dogs, soda, chips and stuff like that. And before we do this video, we're actually having a little conversation about that, and I heard there's a little bit of a competition going on. Can you guys explain real quick for everyone?
Well, real quick, I guess I'll jump in. But I have always said that it's my dream to be in a hot dog eating contest one day. And so you're talking about cooking up hot dogs. And I said that theoretically I could eat 27 hot dogs in one sitting.
Theoretically.
And to clarify the competition portion, I will not be eating 27 hot dogs. But if, Justin, you do eat 27 hot dogs, I'll give you $20.
Might have to take that deal. We'll see.
So you guys should definitely come out this Wednesday. You can eat hot dogs and watch Justin throw up on the floor somewhere. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You can't miss out on that. We'll have our own hot dog eating contest. It'd be great. But anyway, we're continuing our series, What's the Point? The Parables of Jesus. And so this week we're talking about a parable in particular called the parable of the unforgiving servant. So you can find that in Matthew 18. So if you've got your Bibles with you, your Bible app, go ahead and open up to Matthew 18, and it's verses 21 through 35 where you'll find this parable. So Hope, you want to read for us?
Absolutely. All right. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, Pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused, and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
So this is a difficult parable because Jesus is using this example here to talk about, in many ways, us and him. And so a lot of times, he's talking about this king who was with this servant, and this servant, humbled himself and begged for forgiveness for the big debt that he owed and all this money he owed, and the king forgave him. All right, and he didn't need to, or he didn't have to. He didn't. This guy didn't deserve this forgiveness, and yet the king decided to cancel his debts. And the point that Jesus is trying to make is in the same way I've done that for you guys. I've forgiven you for your debts, and not only just forgive it, but also paid that debt. And yet here is this guy not willing to then do that for someone else. And so for me, it's talking about forgiveness and how, God's calling us to forgive as well. But for me, as I think about forgiveness in general, I think that's a very difficult thing to do because it's hard. Sometimes there are things that, people do or say that can, hurt a little bit, and then there's some things that can really hurt a lot. And for me, I think one of the misconceptions about forgiveness is a lot of times we think that forgiveness is about letting them off the hook. And so if we forgive them, man, that means like we're somehow, our pain doesn't matter. We're just, excusing their behavior. They can just do whatever they want. And so that brings a lot of tension. That's why it's difficult to forgive other people.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. One tension that I have with forgiving other people is just like the pain is real. Yeah. It's not like it's not there. It's like you did cause me pain, and I have to acknowledge that first before I can forgive you. And sometimes people don't ask for forgiveness. I'm like, don't love that.
Yeah, so those are a lot of reasons, and like you guys are saying, that makes it really difficult a lot of times for us to forgive. So the way we kind of wanted to start this out is just provide a couple of reasons why forgiveness can be freeing for us and other reasons why it is important to forgive. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is this idea that when we hold on to grudges, we miss out on joy. Mm-hmm. And I'll read that one more time. When we hold on to grudges, we miss out on joy. And so a lot of times when we're holding tight to these grudges, it can almost feel like a burden or a weight on our shoulders, right? And it's something we have to walk around and carry with us, and that can be stressful and really start to weigh us down. But this is why kind of forgiveness is so important, and it's this idea of letting go of that burden or struggle. And I had a quote that I wanted to read real fast too from a famous pastor, but he wrote this. He said, "Every time an offense occurs, forgive. Every single time. If you do not, you will never find a group you can get along with. You're just going to spend your entire existence looking for and expecting perfection from other people, but never finding it. And that's not a happy way to live, and nor is it realistic." And so I just like that quote kind of in the context of friendships and friend groups, because when a lot of times we feel like another person has done something wrong towards us or they've harmed us, if we're not willing to forgive, we're going to bounce around from friend group to friend group and really never take that time to invest in one another. And so this is why extending forgiveness is so important, is because we've all messed up. We've all made mistakes. I have, Jason has, Hope has. We've all messed up before. And so we can't just go around expecting this idea of perfection from other people, but rather we want to invest in these relationships and continue to forgive.
Yeah, I love that, because it's at the end of the day, forgiveness benefits us when we do that. We let go of Justin saying that weight, that burden that we're carrying, all the bitterness inside. And I think another reason it's important to forgive, and it's beneficial, and as honestly is just what Jesus talked about, is that God has extended grace and forgiveness to us. And so at the end of the day, that's kind of what the parable here, why Jesus is saying what he's saying to make this story come to life for us, is realizing like, hey, like I've extended that same gift of grace and forgiveness to you, and so I'm calling you to do the same for others. And so when we talk about forgiveness, well, I don't really want to forgive this person. You don't understand what that person's done. We can go on and on for all the reasons why it is painful and frustrating and real, and I get it. I've been there with some of the things too in my life. But at the end of the day, God can say like, hey, like I understand that, but look what I did for you as well. And so when we talk about forgiveness, it's important to remember the amount of forgiveness that God has shown us as well. And because we've been forgiven, because we've been set free, we can extend that to others. And it benefits us as well, and it can also benefit others and help them grow as well. And so that would be, for me, just kind of with that parable, why it's important to forgive.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, and I think that's the main point of what Jesus is really trying to communicate in this parable. And just as we close out here, we have 3 action steps that we can all do this week. And really these action steps are more of a process of forgiveness and what it would look like to start that process of forgiving others. And so where I want to start with point number 1 is this: reflect on the joy of God's grace. And what I mean by that is just take some time this week to think about what God has done for us. And I think a lot of us tend to just gloss over it or easily forget, but it's so great what God has done for us. And real quick, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the person in this parable, the person who owed 10,000 bags of gold. And I want to kind of make this like a modern translation, right? So pretend you're like a child or a kid and you were playing on your parents' phones. You were playing an app, whether it's Clash of Clans or Angry Birds or any other app. Maybe
Fortnite
on your phone, whatever it is. You're playing on the phone and all of a sudden one of the screen comes up that says you can purchase some extra coins or gems or whatever you want to buy, but it costs real money. And you notice that your parents' credit card is already logged in the phone, and so you just start buying stuff left and right. You're buying merch and coins and virtual currency and all that, and pretty soon you rack up $10,000 worth of debt. How do you think your parents would normally react to that? Not very good. But I want you to pretend with me for a second. So they get the bill, they see it's $10,000, and they come in, and instead of just being super angry, they choose to show forgiveness. They say, hey, I know you messed up, but I'm willing to forgive this. I'm gonna pay this debt. And so put yourself in those shoes for a second. What kind of reaction would you have on the inside? For me, I would be extremely filled with joy. I would be ecstatic. I would just be so excited. And so I want you to think about how great that joy would be. And now think about what God has done for us. And that's actually far greater than that silly little example. What God has done for us is far greater than that example. You know, we were deserving of eternal separation from God because of our sin, but he extended forgiveness to us because of the sacrifice that Jesus made. And so God has extended that grace and forgiveness to us, and we should take the time to just focus on the joy that that brings us and then let our actions flow out of that. And so that would be the first step for us.
That's great.
So that first step is reflect on the joy of God's grace, but the second step is to break the silence. And what I mean by that is be the person who steps out and has a hard conversation. If you're holding a grudge, to work it out, talk it out, approach the other person. Don't wait for them to come asking for forgiveness. You reach out, and conflict isn't fun. Nobody likes conflict, but having that hard conversation and having that empathy and listening to their side as well as communicating yours, that can be what leads to healing. And other times, sometimes they're really receptive and you have a great, awesome conversation in that moment, and sometimes they won't be. Sometimes they're not going to react the way that you want them to, but have the courage to still have that conversation, to seek that healing, because it's good for you. It's healing for you. It's not just about them, but have the courage to kind of have that hard conversation.
That's great. Yeah, it's difficult, and sometimes they handle it well when you confront them, and sometimes they get defensive and don't handle it so well. But I think regardless, the last point is that we should choose to forgive. That is difficult, but it is so important. I want to make it distinguish a few things for you guys. Forgiveness is our responsibility. Reconciliation, that's a two-way street, and that takes two. And what I mean by that is to be reconciled, meaning this idea of the relationship, the friendship, to get better, to be restored, that involves two people. But forgiveness is always our choice. To forgive them, to move on, and remember, like we talked about, it benefits us. It's not about letting them off the hook. It's not about excusing their behavior. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is about taking all those burdens and that pain, that bitterness, and freeing yourself from that. And that's what forgiveness does. That's how it can be healing to us. And so forgiveness is for us. It is to help us. And yes, when we extend forgiveness to others, it also can open up a great opportunity to help them as well. But that reconciliation is a two-way street. And I think for us, choosing to forgive is so important. But also, as you're processing all the hurt and the emotion and then choosing to forgive, that's great. But to be honest, just like with Jesus with this parable, Peter asked him, how many times, and Jesus 77 times. And so I think sometimes, for me, I'm well, all right, what about that 78th time? All right, come on. And I think that's not the point. I think the idea is that we always should be extending and choosing to forgive, regardless of how many times. And for me, as I was thinking about that, obviously it's important to forgive, and there may be times they may be apologetic, say, my bad, I'll try not to do it again. But the reality is that we live in a broken world, and we are all broken people, and we are going to hurt each other again. You will be disappointed again. You will be hurt again. But the choice that we have is to keep on forgiving. And so we have to keep on doing that. And also, sometimes there are times where maybe there is a certain hurt or a painful experience that you had in your past or with a family member or a friend. And you may have chosen forgiveness, say, I forgive you, but there may be something that reminds you of that hurt. There may be something that comes up later in your life. Maybe it's a certain season or a memory that reminds you of a very painful memory. And those are the moments where you got to be willing to forgive again. And be saying, you know what, all right, I'm feeling all these things and I want to choose to forgive again. And so for me, I know that's been really pivotal for me in my life, choosing to forgive and continuing to forgive. Because like Justin, he's talking about this idea, these steps, these are steps. This is a process. Forgiveness isn't just something, I forgive you and everything's good. Like this is a process. Sorry, my ring's real loud. It is a process where we're choosing to forgive, and that is something that takes time, but it's something that can heal us and help us grow. And for me, as I was thinking about this parable, kind of wrapping it up all in one thing, I would just challenge you guys with this bottom line. And it's a very challenging one, a difficult one, but I think a very fruitful one, and that is this: forgive others to the same level that God has forgiven you. Forgive others to the same level that God has forgiven you. And I think that's a super high standard, right? God forgave us, and he paid our debt, right? And he did this extraordinary amount of love. And for us, when we're struggling whether or not to forgive someone, to show them grace, to love them, we got to remember first how our Father in heaven forgave us, right? And that should then challenge us as we're reflecting on that, as we're going to that person, having that conversation. It's going to help us when we choose to forgive. And so I would encourage you, as difficult as it is, and forgiveness is a difficult thing, but to do that because it is so beneficial to you, because of the way that God's done it for you. So I hope this message, while difficult, is an encouragement for you, because I know it can really benefit you if you're willing to forgive. So we're excited this week. Like they mentioned, we're going to have some fun events. Definitely come out on Wednesday for the summer cook-off. That's right. I keep saying cook-off. I'm going to get it right. Kick-off. I'm just thinking about hot dogs all the time. Can't wait to see all these hot dogs getting chowed down by Justin. So definitely come on out on Wednesday. Make sure you register before, so that way we know you're coming. And we'll see you there.
Take care. All right. See you guys.
Bye.